phone calls with my family because international calls are banned. My cellmate, 23-year-old Hanan from Syria, sat for over 2 years without knowing a single thing about her family. She kept begging authorities to at least give her just one call to ensure that her family was okay. The endless nights she spent crying, asking me if her family was okay, or did I think they died, took a toll on us both. Later we learned that both her parents were unfortunately killed in a bombing in Syria. What would those in charge have lost by giving her a single call to ensure that her family was okay? The list of violations are long, too many to mention in the short speech. During winter, the hot water would be cut off for those in solitary confinement. During summer, the water was scalding hot, burning our skins and hair. Today, my sister and I still suffer because of that. We were regularly denied basic hygiene like soap or adequate clothes. Married detainees were forced to sign divorce papers, and the many children who are imprisoned are kept in the cell almost 24/7. Were kept 24/7, only being let out when guards feel like it. In one instance, a mother, Salma Baluchi, was imprisoned with her 4 children, all younger than 13 years old. They were only allowed 1 hour out of the cell for sunlight. Every attempt by my family to try to understand what was going on and why was unsuccessful. They did everything as we described in Saudi law to secure my freedom, and still there was no clarity on my case. The only thing that was clear was that no one knew why we had been arrested and what could be done to get us out. It was entirely arbitrary and illegal, not just my case, but for the rest of the girls. At the end, I'd like to say imprisoning scholars like Sheikh Salman al-Auda and innocent infants like Kayan al-Jahani is not going to make your country better. You need to win people over, not drive them away. I ask for basic rights to be given to political detainees in Saudi and all over the world, for there to be set rules and laws, and that those above ensure that these laws are implemented, not where each one does as he or she wants. Political detainees are not criminals. Political detainees are not criminals. A different opinion or outlook on life should be embraced as a positive thing. Work with them to make your country better. Don't detain them. Come forward and say we are all human. Come forward and say that we have made mistakes. At the end, we are all human and make mistakes. All I ask for is change and accountability. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Yumna, for the testimony. Huda Mohammed is also a teacher and a full-time single mother to her 12-year-old daughter. She was held at the Ban prison over a year without charge and without even being informed of why she was there. Since being released from her imprisonment, she's been left both mentally and physically unfit to continue with her teaching job, but not unwilling to continue to fight for redress. This has affected also her daughter in a way which is even in some ways worse. At the time of her arrest, she was an English teacher, teaching English as a foreign language in Saudi Arabia. Huda, you have the floor.
Everybody, is it on? On? Good morning, everybody. I'd like to, I would like to greet you in the universal Islamic greeting of Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, most kind, most merciful. I would like to thank the Canadian government for inviting me here today, and to know peace without justice for making this possible. My name is Huda Mohammed. I'm an English teacher and full-time mum to a 12-year-old daughter. I was unjustly detained in Saudi Arabia's political prisons, Asir, Dhahban and Hair, without reason or charge. I'm here today with my sister, as we were both unlawfully detained by the Saudi authorities. Our two brothers were also arrested along with us, but never charged. Our arrests, like those of many other innocent people in the country, was violent and confusing, and to this day remains a mystery. My reason for traveling to Saudi Arabia on 1st May 2015 was for my daughter to be closer to her Saudi dad and to be able to provide for her financially, as the wage and job offer was just what I was looking for. During my year of unjust detention, I was psychologically tortured, threatened to be force-fed if I resisted or continued claiming my basic rights, one of which was to be allowed to speak to my 8-year-old daughter back home to let her know that I was just alive and well. On my arrival at Asir prison in Abha province, I refused to enter my cell unless I was first allowed to talk to my daughter back home or to talk to my embassy and to be given reason as to why I was being arrested. I was then forcefully dragged along the floor into my cell by 2 female soldiers and shoved into my cell, with the door being slammed into my face. That's when reality hit and my nightmare began. My world was now a tiny, bare cell without running water and proper washing facilities. I sit in my empty cell, crying out my daughter's name, and that's when I decided to go on a hunger strike until I was allowed contact with my daughter. I continued the hunger strike for 3 days and 3 nights, together with refusing to lie down on my mattress or sleep. When fatigue finally overtook my body, I was forced to lie down and place my arm over my face. Immediately, the officer banged on my cell and ordered me to remove my hand from my face at once, as it was not allowed for me to cover my face for security reasons. The only reason I was forced to cover my face while sleeping was due to the bright fluorescent lights that shone upon our faces 24/7. I was finally allowed to meet the manager, Abu Faris, who then arrogantly informed me that I would cause them no harm by my hunger strike, but rather I would be taken to the hospital and force-fed. I asked him to do as he wanted, but I would not give up until I was allowed the basic right of speaking to my daughter. Strangely enough, he agreed. He asked me to go back to my cell and eat, while he brings a phone for me to contact my daughter. I challenged him by saying, "You bring the phone first, and then I will eat." It happened, and I was finally allowed to call my daughter for 3 minutes. I was instructed not to inform her. I believe that it was only a mother's love, and really a mother's love, that drove me to fight for a call for my daughter, despite the gruesomeness of the prison and the punishment that faced for doing this, despite the threats of being force-fed, despite the graphic sight of blood on the walls and the screams that never ended. A mother's love is what gave me the strength to stand up in the face of all of this. I was told that I would be transferred to Tahban in Jeddah on a private plane. I was handcuffed, blindfolded, and transferred in a cage-like vehicle disguised as an ambulance so that people are deceived as to who is inside. The Tahban prison was just as bad as Asir prison, where I was held 2 months in solitary confinement with no exposure to sunlight, no access to books, pens, or anything from the outside, including conversing with anybody except the soldiers. I literally had to beg for basic hygiene items like soap, shampoo, etc. I was only able to clip my nails and brush my hair after 2 months, when I was finally afforded a nail clipper and comb. I was wrongfully detained and psychologically tortured with no reason or explanation, and nobody being held accountable. The Saudi authorities have taken away my job, my income, my home, my belongings, and the future of my daughter and I. And yet they still arrogantly refuse to undo the harm they have caused. The only thing I can hope for is that they are aware of the psychological effects that this has had on us as a family, and the severe damage it has caused in the relationship between my daughter and I. How can a sister bear the pain of knowing that her brother had been taken to the torture camp for simply requesting to see a doctor due to the spiders that infested his cell and bit him? How can a sister sleep knowing that her brother stands shackled on the floor of a freezing cell without being able to offer him a word of sympathy? My brother, I mean my blood brother, Which human is strong enough to bear the screaming of fellow female inmates in the dark of the night, not knowing the reasons behind the screams? I thought my nightmare had finally ended after 1 year. Had ended 1 year later when I received the news of my release, but no, my nightmare was not over. I realized that I would be released with only one of my brothers. I had to leave my younger brother and sister behind. That was one of the most difficult moments of my life. I am standing here today, not entirely by choice, but rather due to having tried every other avenue, including flying to Saudi Arabia on a pilgrimage visa after my release, obviously, which I believe is the only way I can enter the country after being deported. Flying there and fighting for days on end, until I was almost hospitalized when I had a mental breakdown to get a meeting with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's brother Faisal bin Salman. After a few days, they finally allowed me to meet with him. I explained my case, and I'm talking about Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's brother, Faisal bin Salman. The first words to me that he said to me was, "Huda, you deserve compensation." My last words to him, as he was swiftly taken away by his guards, were, "Please help me, my brother," to which he replied, "Inshallah, God willing." In addition to that, I forced my way into meeting with the Mubahith, Saudi Arabian Secret Service, who were responsible for my arrest and detention. I was welcomed by huge automatic guns faced at me and saying, "Go back, hands up, what do you want here?" Which again, I endured, I would say, with my daughter in front, looking at my daughter. Saudi, yes, we are responsible for my arrest. In short, all of them said I was wronged and they will assist. But it is now 9 months of calling the officers with no responses. They either answer and say, "I cannot hear you," or "We will get back to you." It's 3 years since I've been released. After what I've explained, nobody can accuse me of challenging or bad-mouthing Saudi Arabia. I'm simply telling my story, and this is my last resort. I do love Saudi Arabia, but not the laws and not these things that happen. I consider it my second country, as my daughter is a citizen of the country, a citizen who has never been given her rights. After being released from prison, I also sent out a video plea to King Salman, directly asking him to compensate me for and give me my rights back and my job and what was stolen from me. I've never received recognition or response. 2 weeks before me standing here, I called Faisal bin Salman's office, Prince Faisal bin Salman, and told him that I would be taking the case to the United Nations, and I would be taking the case to the United Nations. As I was not only wronged in the country, but unjust detention as well. I believe I've also been denied many rights as a mother of a Saudi national. One of the people who answered the call at the office arrogantly told me, "What do you want from us? Give us your daughter back. She belongs to Saudi Arabia, and then you have nothing to claim from the country." Whatever gives them the right to speak to me in this way. Today we have submitted an official complaint about our treatment by Saudi Arabia to the UN working group on arbitrary detention. I am asking all of you present to not forget what I've mentioned before you here today. It is pretty obvious by now that what has happened to me is happening to others. I am not here only for myself, but rather for the many other innocents like myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Before I open the floor for interventions, we've asked Matthew Hedges to give us a little bit of his observations. Matthew, as I mentioned, is an academic and specializing in Gulf political sciences, I guess you'd say. He's also a former detainee. He was subject to some of the same treatment that was mentioned by our witnesses while in detention in the United Arab Emirates. Matthew.
Good morning.